This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 218 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. We are closing in on the end of this really crazy year of 2020, and I thought it is time to look forward to 2021 and have a think about what travel might look like next year in hopefully what will be a less pandemic-y year, let's call it. We will see. So this episode is all about travel trends for 2021. I have got a couple of experts to chat to after this first section, but first up, I've got my favourite experts, which are the members of the Thoughtful Travellers Facebook group. So we had a chat in there the other day about what they think the travel trends for 2021 are. And there was so many fabulous responses, but I've picked out a few that I think highlight, I suppose, some of the commonalities and some of the diversities of what we are expecting from next year, from 2021. So first up, Celeste, who's in the US, said, I don't think I'll travel at all in 2021. Coronavirus cases are the highest they've ever been in my area. I plan to remain home in 2021 and hope to travel in 2022. And I know I commented back to Celeste that if I was in her situation, I think I would feel exactly the same. I've said it before and I will say it again. I've been very, very lucky to be living during this pandemic year here in Western Australia, where apart from being unable to travel beyond our state, we haven't had any really significant repercussions, not compared to many, many parts of the world. So Narelle from Perth, same as me, said she doesn't plan on travelling internationally next year, and we don't even know, of course, when our borders might open, but would look at interstate travel in the second half of 2021. Now, this is interesting. Narelle says, I'd like to think we'll become more socially conscious, supporting smaller businesses to help them get back on their feet. And I also think we might spend more time in one area rather than hopping around, perhaps travel to less crowded places, not the bigger or more populated areas. And I've heard that trend from a few people, and in fact, I address it with one of my experts later. Kristen, who's currently in Switzerland, says, I think travel will be more spontaneous and more local than ever before. And Sandra in Victoria here in Australia agreed on that local and spontaneous thing. I think the idea of booking at the last minute when you know exactly what's going on and not going too far, those kind of things are certainly what I've already been doing this year and make a lot of sense in the circumstances. Anne, who's in Phoenix, Arizona, said that they just purchased a fuel-efficient car and they plan to road trip through most of 2021 and choosing their destinations based on coronavirus safety and warm weather. So that's another kind of being, flexible and spontaneous approach. Now, Sam from the UK said she's still planning a long trip, like 6 months plus, from the summer of 2021. But I think her destination, she said, destinations will be different considering the country's ability to cope with if there was another virus surge. So she said, given that I live in the UK, lots of other countries are doing this better than us. China and neighbouring countries look safest to me at the moment. I will definitely not be using dorms in hostels as much as I usually do. Makes a lot of sense. It's the whole let's not be too crowded, I suppose. So now Emma in Queensland said, similar to some, I think it'll continue to be a lot more last minute, and I think companies will also have to have better and more flexible cancellation and change policies as things will continue to change. And Emma also says, I hope that people will travel more consciously and sustainably, but at the moment, with us reverting back to so much packaging for food and single-use items because of hygiene, I worry that will all slip away so swiftly again. Now, interestingly, I chat with one of my experts about exactly this, so it'd be interesting to see what Emma thinks about that. Now, finally, Shireen in Perth had something quite clever to say. She said, reading through these comments, it seems travel will have new layers of complexity. Very true. I can imagine an emerging market for COVID smart travel advisories or agents. I think there's a sector that will pay to be guided by someone who is up to date and fully across all the issues, including terms and conditions of airfares. And I think that's smart. So if you are the kind of person who loves all those details, maybe that is a really good new career path, because I know even for myself, having just booked a short trip interstate, I did spend quite some time looking at terms and conditions and domestic insurance policies, etc., etc., none of which I find very interesting, but has become more important. And I think there's definitely a market for a kind of an agent who can translate that and book with those things in mind. So there you go. That's a selection of our thoughts from the Thoughtful Travellers Facebook group about how we think travel in 2021 will look. And now I've got a bit of a chat that I had with Nissy Atassi, who's the Director of Global Communications at Expedia. So she has access to lots of interesting stats and research trends. And I asked Nissy to tell me what she thought would be some of 2021's main travel trends.
Well, I think we're all pretty optimistic that travel is going to come back with a vengeance in the second half of the year. I think the news of the vaccine from around the world has people feeling really, really good. And I think it has people actually starting to think about, maybe potentially starting to plan some big trips in 2021. Perhaps not in the first half, but I think definitely in the back half of the year. So I think that's something that I know I'm looking forward to. And I think a lot of us avid travelers are really looking forward to that as well.
Definitely. From a perspective of booking ahead, you said already, maybe we'll plan in the second half of the year. Is that kind of just we need more time for vaccines and stuff? And what about, how far are people booking ahead and planning these days?
Yeah, so I would say on average, travelers are booking around 35 days in advance. I think it depends, which market you're in and what your origin is. Some travelers, in fact, I was having a conversation with a colleague in Canada, and those travelers are booking on a much shorter lead time. So they're only booking about 2 weeks out. So it's definitely varying from country to country, just sort of based on the type of traveler that they are. But I would say, I think people are, right now, the type of trips that people are booking are probably a lot closer to home. We're probably looking at staycations or things that really lean into being able to be in the outdoors. People are venturing to, areas that aren't as crowded. So big cities aren't really that popular right now. So I would say that, as we look to 2021, I would imagine that people will start to consider traveling to some of those more popular destinations where, during a pandemic, you may not want to go to because they're incredibly busy and packed. But, once we get into 2021 and the vaccine becomes a little bit more widely spread, I think we'll see people starting to explore that. So I would venture to guess that, as we get in through the year and as things progress, hopefully with the vaccine, I think that booking window of people starting to plan, about a month out will probably still stay the same. And we might actually see people starting to book a little bit further out just in anticipation of wanting to lock in some of the great deals that people are seeing now.
Yeah, I think that's true. I was asking in my Thoughtful Travellers Facebook group about this, and there was an example of a guy from the States who's booked for he found really cheap fares to Japan in, I think it was June or so next year. Bought them in the hope that he'll be able to use them, and if not, then he'll move it to the following year, kind of thing. So I think booking with some kind of flexibility in mind and
critical.
Yeah,
it's absolutely critical right now. I think that honestly has been the biggest shift that we've seen in the travel industry, and I think it's one thing that we all hope actually sticks around even after COVID. For the first time ever, we are seeing airlines and hoteliers really sort of shift their policies to be incredibly advantageous for the traveler. I think before, especially with flights, any small change is sometimes going to cost you, potentially $150 just to, change the date or change the flight by an hour or something along those lines. It was incredibly costly to make those adjustments. But now so many of the airlines are waiving a lot of those change fees and penalties, because they understand that right now what is going to make a traveler feel comfortable is giving them that flexibility. They want to know that maybe they're not going to be able to get a full refund, but they want to at least be able to get a credit that they can use at a future date. And I think a lot of hoteliers are doing the exact same things. So we've always seen fully refundable rates for hotels and non-refundable rates. And typically The non-refundable rates are, of course, always a little bit cheaper. That's across everything in the travel industry. The cheaper it is, the more restrictions you're probably going to get.
Of course.
But even from a hotel perspective, we're seeing them sort of put some fully refundable rates out there that are really competitive to the non-refundable rates. So that idea of making sure that travelers understand that they have the flexibility and providing them the flexibility is something that we are definitely seeing across the board, and something that we think and hope will continue into 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, that would be great, wouldn't it? It's a lot more user friendly. Yeah.
And
Fingers
a lot
crossed.
of the major U.S. airlines have come out and said that they are permanently waiving these types of change fees, like sort of in perpetuity. So it's a really good signal, I think, for the future.
Yeah. That is really encouraging, I think, because I think being able to be a bit more flexible and spontaneous is a good thing. So
absolutely.
Yep. What about some other trends? I think I've heard that people are looking at kind of different kinds of accommodation.
Yeah, absolutely. The idea of alternative accommodations has really sort of been on the rise for a couple of years now. I think vacation rentals have, of course, really saw a resurgence, or I guess an emergence, if you will, over the past couple of years, when travelers were really looking for those, sort of more unique experiences, or this idea that they can travel like a local, and this feeling that they can get that more localized experience by staying in somebody else's home and by not having to stay in a hotel and things like that. So we're definitely seeing that trend continue. I think other things like, chalets and cottages and even castles, which when that came out, I was so shocked that we actually had castles here in the United States and that we sold them on Expedia. And I was very embarrassed, actually, that I didn't know that. But those types of things, people are really sort of leaning into it. And the hypothesis behind that is, especially right now, when people are traveling and, maybe they're driving to a destination and renting some lodging, they're mainly not going to be leaving the accommodations that they're in because they're trying to socially distance.
Right.
So when you're going somewhere and you're spending the majority of your time in your vacation rental or in your, wherever you're staying, you want it to be really, really good. And so people, I think, are getting a little bit more creative, trying to, just get the most out of their travel experience. And also, if you're not paying money for a flight right now, then maybe there's a little bit extra room in your budget to sort of splurge on a really nice place. And so maybe there's a castle in our future for everyone.
I love that idea. I'm fairly confident we don't actually have any castles nearby me, but what you say is exactly right. The last trip I went on was a road trip, and exactly that. I hadn't spent much money on travel this year, so I spent a bit more on the accommodation than I normally would. And I made sure it was somewhere that I was happy to hang out, which is really a different thing from, like, in previous years. Often I would be going somewhere where I'd be out and about all day. I would have spent a lot on the airfare because from Perth, you always spend a lot on the airfare. Yeah. And I would have been treating my accommodation as somewhere where I'm going to sleep and not much else. But that's...
Yeah, but it's definitely a lot different now. And I think, I think we always, a lot of the times, a lot of us think, oh, there's a certain sort of luxury in a really amazing hotel room and, the bathrooms and ordering room service and things like that. And now it almost feels like that is the trip, for some people, right? If you're taking a staycation and you just need a change of scenery. I know a ton of people here, where I live, who are literally just going and driving 30 minutes and staying in an absolutely beautiful hotel room and just spending the night there for one night just so that they can get away.
Yeah.
And, I think for so many of us, that's really what we need right now. And we should all feel like we have the opportunity, to do that for ourselves. And I think with some of the rates that we're seeing, in some instances, vacation rentals have also gotten really expensive because the homeowners are recognizing that this is a huge opportunity for them. So, I'll go in and look sometimes and I'll find these vacation rentals that seem really, quite expensive. And then I'll go and I'll look at, a gorgeous hotel room at like the Four Seasons. And sometimes it's almost a little bit more affordable. So it's really interesting to see these the tides are changing a little bit.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, I know here in Western Australia, it's been really intriguing to see that a lot of the accommodation has been really heavily booked, almost booked out for months.
Yeah.
when it normally wouldn't be. But we've got this whole population that's trapped here. We might not have, well, we do have zero visitors from abroad, but and until very recently, none from interstate either. But we are getting out there and booking everything up, which is really kind of, it's so interesting to see and quite different. I mean, I've been one of them too, so I've been doing just that. It'll be interesting to see. Have you got any other key trends that you think we need to keep an eye on for 2021 in travel?
I would say that we will see people almost going back to the basics a little bit in terms of how they travel and where they travel. I think what's happened over the past year is, people have started to really miss their tried and true vacation spots because they haven't been available to them. So I would say as we look to 2021, I think we'll see some of the more basic, travel destinations probably sort of come back and be really, really popular because people are just sort of missing some of the old school favorites. I would say the other, sort of trend that I think will continue to happen that we've been seeing in 2021 is this focus on health and safety.
Yeah.
And a lot of the airlines have been really, really sort of overt with the precautions that they're taking and those sort of extra cleanliness measures that they're doing on the aircraft. And same with some of the hotels. They're really pushing contactless check-in or wiping down the remotes and things like that to really make, travelers feel more comfortable. So that is a trend that I think we all probably hope will continue in 2021 and beyond.
And maybe forever, yes.
Yeah, I hope it's forever.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So to sum up my chat with Nissy, more flexibility with bookings. That sounds good, and we hope that's a trend that continues. More interest in alternative accommodation, so not just straight hotels. And that's something, as you would know if you've listened to me before, that I love that idea. And a focus on health and safety. And I think who doesn't want to have a healthy tourist industry? Seems like a reasonable expectation to me, and something that, of course, has become much more important. Now, my second guest today is Damian Perry, who's the Managing Director for the Australia Pacific region at Hurtigruten. So you might remember, if you don't know of them, Hurtigruten are an expedition cruising company. And way back in episode 190, you might remember when I chatted to Carolyn Beasley, who got stranded or semi-stranded on her way back from Antarctica as COVID struck. And she was travelling with Hurtigruten, and I know she raved about how good they were at managing that awful situation, which hopefully they'll never have to do again. That was quite the time. But anyway, I asked Damian as well about what he thinks some of the key travel trends will be in 2021 and beyond.
What we're finding at the moment is that there is certainly a very strong demand. There's quite a large pent-up demand for people to go travelling again. That is very, very clear. And we take that measurement from researching our clients, but also looking at the rebooking process of people who have actually held a booking for this year and wanting to rebook again next year. So 2021 is really interesting because I think it depends on what market you're traveling from determines how much is going to happen. So if you're traveling from Australia, New Zealand, for example, a lot of what we do at Hurtigruten is long haul travel to the poles, Antarctica and the high Arctic. So in those marketplaces, we'll be looking at Q4 from, say, September, October onwards in 2021, where people will be permitted to travel more freely. Things would have changed by then, and basically those destinations will be on their hit list again. But what we're also seeing, though, is those destinations where you can sail close to home, that's quite popular for 2021. So when we're sailing in the Americas or in say for Alaska, along the coast of Alaska, Northwest Passage, even Greenland, that demand is coming a lot earlier for both the Americas and also from the European market. I think we're going to see quite a few things happen in 2021 and different markets going to different destinations at different time frames throughout 2021. Realistically, most of it will kick off from April, May, June onwards. Throughout the rest of 2021. So the beautiful summer in the Arctic, the Norwegian coast, the Northern Hemisphere activity will kick off then. But worldwide, I think from 2022, you'll see some level of normality. And that's really quite interesting because that's where we're seeing people today book quite freely and quite openly and quite comfortably into 2022 to go travelling again.
Interesting. And I assume in the past people were not booking that far in advance usually.
No, not really. No. We're much earlier than we would normally be. And this is a combination of people who are rebooking, but also what we've found is new bookings. For example, Hurtigruten, the USA team, recently had an offer put into the market in the USA, and it was incredibly successful for new clients who hadn't travelled with us before.
Right.
So
there you go.
So that demand is widespread. So I don't think it's very normal for people to be stuck at home. People like to travel more freely.
It's really not normal, is it?
So I think the build-up is there, and it's just a matter of which market takes off when.
Yeah. It's interesting because obviously a lot of your tours are into, or your cruises are into quite remote areas. And I've seen some discussion that not just in cruising, but in travel in general, that people are perhaps going to be wanting to go to those more, I don't want to, even not necessarily remote, but emptier places, like, kind of travel in a way that they're not in busy cities, but travel where they're kind of, there's more space and there's less, I guess, fewer crowds. Do you think that that's part of the travel trends for the coming year or two?
I think there's something in that. There certainly is, but I'm not quite sure if we've got a very good memory as humans. Things pass very, very quickly, and I'm sure that once the vaccines start kicking in and that some level of normality takes off again, I think people will be back to their normality in travel once again. But what we are seeing, though, is that those bucket list destinations are becoming more and more important. People have made that decision, actually, do you know what? I am not going to miss out on Antarctica, so I'm going to book that now. And I'm not going to miss out on Greenland or Iceland. So that's where we see a really big trend where people may not be doing it just because they want to avoid a city, but they're doing it because they don't want to miss out on hitting those bucket list destinations over the next couple of years, just in case something happens again.
Well, that's right. I think we've never had that feeling before, that we've always thought, we can go there anytime, sometime in the future. And now suddenly we have that feeling, wow, it's actually possible that we can not go places.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
I think that's overriding everything. That sort of uncertainty or fear is, hang on, I've been waiting 5 years or 8 years for my big trip to Antarctica, so I'm not missing it. And then we're definitely seeing that trend, and that's been really, really interesting from a destination point of view. But the polar regions are very, very hot right now in the fact that people just want to be there. Yeah. So that's exciting. It's exciting.
Now, you said something in there which I want to pick up on about how humans have poor memories about these things, and about lots of this stuff I think is true. So especially when lockdown started, I kind of started to think, people will be more thoughtful in their travel choices when they get out. I thought, especially when you saw all those, lots of footage of like nature returning to places where tourists weren't anymore. I thought, this is it for sustainability. This is going to be the big, finally we're going to, travel more sustainably and really want to do it. But is it a case of the memory or what? I don't know. What do you think? Do you think like sustainable travel will have, any kind of boost from this lockdown time?
Yeah, I do. I think so. I really do. I agree with you. There's cycles and there's ups and downs, and people see it in different times and different ways. But from a sustainable travel point of view, I mean, that's the number one focus for us, and it's been very, very important. And it is very, very clear now that travellers are choosing sustainable or responsible travel operations. They're choosing partners that can do that, and they're choosing partners that can justify their strategies and plans around sustainability. So we are definitely seeing a situation where it's become more important. It's certainly one of our core focuses as an organisation. It's our number one pillar, in fact. But we are seeing that engagement level increase dramatically, and that decision-making process. Sustainability might have been the third reason they choose us. Now or the fourth reason. Now it's pushing right up to 1 and 2. And we've invested heavily in that. We've invested in innovation when it comes to technology and hybrid-powered ships and biogas-fueled ships, all to lower emissions. We've gone plastic-free. We've done all sorts of different things which are all about the future to create a sustainable expedition cruise environment. And I believe right now the people are acknowledging that and making that choice. So it's not going to be washed away. I think it is still relevant. Is it the the same energy that it had when everything first kicked off? Possibly not. Maybe it's slowed down a little bit, but it's in the decision-making process, and it's still important, which is really fantastic, to be honest, because the awareness level is going up. In fact, just on a side thing, I just noticed the other day, there's a bit of an airline conversation now where, some major airlines are now having, producing advertising material and conversations around biofuels and low emission planes. And they're big researchers. So they've obviously seen that it's really important for people as well. So they wouldn't do it if it wasn't important. So
no, exactly. If it wasn't going to drive them, the passengers. Yeah. So that is really encouraging to hear.
Yeah, I'm positive, and I think there's plenty of energy behind it. And if it's done one thing, even if it doesn't change the mindset of the end traveller today, what it has done in this period, it's changed the mindset of the organisations, because they're now becoming more proactive in making change internally. There's more organisations now looking at alternative fuel sources. There's more organisations looking at removing single-use plastic. There's more organisations thinking about sustainability and talking about sustainability. So the conversation is getting larger, which is really important.
That is very heartening to hear that kind of stuff, because I live in a bit of a bubble. I talk a lot to the listeners of my podcast, and they're all very thoughtful travellers, or they wouldn't be listeners to this podcast. And so, sometimes I think, everyone's on board, things are going to be much better. But then I can step back and think, hang on, that's just my kind of, little microcosm. But it is encouraging to hear the bigger picture is looking good.
Yeah, and I think the important thing right now is that we take the responsibility to keep that conversation going as well. Yeah. But the other thing that's really important of what we're saying, we put sustainability very, very high on our agenda in everything we do, which is fantastic. But the other thing that's coming through is that a huge focus for Hurtigruten is on education, learning, and knowledge sharing. So we've invested this huge amount of real estate on our ships into science centres, and these science centres have become the heart of our experience. So, we're an expedition cruise company, so we more focus on the environment and science and research, etc., than we are on water slides and other fun things on larger ships. Yeah. But we find right now that is becoming incredibly important as well with our guests. That's been a great conversation to have as well, because, you can sit around a lecture theatre or a science centre and you're actually involved through the citizen science projects. So they get their hands dirty, they do the research. In fact, one of the things we saw last year in Antarctica was that the biggest exercise that was oversubscribed in was people trying to attend the research collection of phytoplankton and data. So we have got really engaged travellers which actually focus on this, which is fantastic. So that science knowledge sharing part of it has just become just as important as well. And again, it's important for our travellers, but it's also really important for our partners and the organisations and the researchers we work with, because they get access to the whole group of travellers who are interested in this space of sustainability and responsible travel, and they become champions and share the news. So it's good.
Yeah, it's a win-win all round, isn't it? Yeah,
it is. Yeah, so I really feel like it's been a horrible year.
But
in so many ways, it's been a horrible year. But I still feel that the future is looking good. It's looking really positive.
So I love hearing that sustainable travel and educational travel are likely to come out of this COVID era with a bit of a boost. And it doesn't surprise me at all to hear about people wanting to tick off their bucket list destinations. I'm not a big fan of the bucket list concept, but I completely understand that feeling of, wow, I really have to make the most of it because we don't know if or when travel could stop again. And I know that's one of my best learnings from this COVID year is I can look back on the travels I've done in the past and I don't have any regrets. I don't feel that, I wish I'd done this trip or I should have done that. I actually feel like I've so far in life done a pretty good job of grabbing all the opportunities I could. And I want to keep that up, obviously, but it was really, comforting to feel that. So I can certainly understand for people who haven't done that it's time to get out there while they can. So I hope you found this discussion on 2021 travel trends to be interesting. it'll be very, I'm intrigued to look back in a year or two's time and see, what did we get right and what really happened? Who knows? This world is so crazy these days, who knows? But anyway, a huge thank you to my guests. Thank you very much to Nissy Atassi from Expedia and to Damian Perry from Hurtigruten for your time and expert thoughts. I'll also leave a link in the show notes to that episode I referred to where Carolyn described coming back from Antarctica. That was episode 190. And of course, there's a link in the show notes to our Facebook group for Thoughtful Travellers. And thank you so much to the members of that group who provided their ideas about travel trends for 2021 as well. I really appreciate them. So these show notes I keep mentioning can be found at notaballerina.com/218. As always, thank you very much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.